All right, guys, we are back. HVAC Know It All Business Edition podcast. So in 2025 or 2026, why would you start your own business? This conversation is a part two to that. We got Ian and Robin, and we got Furman Haynes, who is my co-host. And there's my phone dinging off again, as it usually does, because we are busy. We are busy in the field. So why start your own HVAC business? Go back, listen to part one with Robin and Ian and Furman and myself having this discussion. Then come back and hit up part two, and you're going to get that full scope, that full story. And if you're just on the fence, or if you've already started your own business, this conversation is for you guys too. So let's get into this, guys. This is the HVAC Know It All Business Edition podcast. We got my man Furman and we got myself. So let's get to it.
And what's the actual lawsuit risk here? I mean, talk about, because we know, like, let's be honest, like guys do this all the time. Subbing in the industry is one of the most common practices. I don't think that many people ever get sued, but I'm curious. I know we can't ask you to be a lawyer, but tell
Yes,
us,
this
like,
is not considered legal advice, everybody.
No,
definitely not.
I'm an HR professional and not a lawyer. My role is to minimize the need for lawyers wherever possible. And one of them is avoiding subcontractors.
Yeah, but what would be your advice to a guy who's sitting here listening and he's at, he maybe has one helper, but he's subbing out, a third to a half of his work? How should he think about changing or not changing those practices?
If he's subbing out, or if he's basically sharing his workload with somebody else regularly to a third to a half, I would be looking at bringing them in as an employee rather than keeping them in that sub relationship. The only way that I know of to avoid that conundrum is if you are actually registered as a general contractor and you're promoting that you're vetting the crews that are coming out to do this work versus promoting them as your own teams. Our teams of certified professionals, you have to basically lay it out that, yeah, these aren't our employees. And that's a level of protection. But even then, it's not guaranteed in case of, more depending on what state you're in. Some states are going to be more rigorous on that than others. But the more you're leaning on subcontractors in those early stages, that's really a big cue to make that shift and bring them under your brand as employees sooner rather than later, before just something in the relationship changes.
Or as business partners, right? If you have a friend who's at similar experience to you, bring them on. You guys be co-owners of the same business.
I'll jump in real quick if we got a second on that, but it's definitely a delicate dance, just like Gary was saying, as far as it on paper, it's like, oh yeah, just get an employee, like cut and dry. But then being able to stay far enough ahead and keep the calendar full, to keep a guy around.
That's one of the major concerns as a business owner. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You bring guys on board and all of a sudden it's not, you're just like, hey, I got work. You have one more guy, two more guys, X amount of more people to worry about, like, hey, I got to provide for these guys and have them enough work. So when you're kind of on that rocky up and down, getting off the ground, it's a little difficult. So you got to get a little creative. I mean, I don't know, within the bounds of, 1099 versus W-2. I mean, I was doing a little bit of that, with some guys who had their own business, had their own insurance, had gaps to fill. So we both kind of, teamed up on that. They were, free to take on work, not take on work, it worked out at the time. Since kind of grown past that, and then now can keep things busy enough to justifiably have like two guys, full calendar, no concerns there. One other thing would be like temp agencies, temp kind of outfits, kind of makes success with that. So, just know that going into it. If you have something that's a little bit more, manual, cut and dry, straightforward, you're like, hey, do this with this tool kind of thing, like cleaning up, what have you. It's not like, hey, let's make flares, let's have you do the brazing. Like, like there's levels to that, but that's also another option just in terms of, bringing on a little bit more labor for a larger job that's going to be a week or two and then you're done with it. But just just another kind of tool to utilize.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that as a temp agency. I don't know if there's temp agencies around here that would provide you someone for HVAC, but what you can utilize are students in co-op programs for colleges that have HVAC courses, or even high school students that are in co-op. You don't have to pay them. It's not part of what they do is to be paid. You can if you want to, It's up to you. But essentially, they're there as part of their education and curriculum to be a co-op student. So they can get into your truck, and if you need a hand lugging filters around a roof, they can follow you, bring the filters. You know what I mean? You can give them basic instructions, stuff like that. So that's also something that you can do. But I want to come back to you, Ian, because you said bring it on that person, that sub as an employee. And I'm going to tell you right now, 90% of my work comes from being subbed out by larger commercial companies because I'm a service tech in commercial. And there's no way in hell that I would jump on board to those companies as a full-time employee, because then I lose all the benefits of being a business owner. So it's just something to think about in that respect. And I don't know all the laws around it in Canada as sub tax laws and legal issue. I don't know all of that, to be honest with you. I'll say that out front in the open, but 90% of my work comes from being subbed by larger companies. And if I've got a project like a 3-zone mini split heat pump or something like that, I will take a local sub like I did 4 weeks ago, and say, hey guys, I got this project. Can you help? They carve out time in their schedule. They come, the job is under my business, and I just pay them for their time and materials. And they bill me and invoice me through their company. So that's just kind of the way that I've found a loophole without having employees, and it's worked well for me.
I have 2 quick points on that. One,
Sure.
that larger commercial company is positioned as a general contractor. So them subbing out to you is exactly what I'm talking about with
Yeah.
that. And it's commercial, so it doesn't have to be as much brand representation. If you're in a residential space or something like that, your brand is the lifeblood of your company, and that's something that you need to protect, which you can't do with subs just by default. So from a business standpoint,
it actually
it's
does
good.
happen. It actually does happen by default here. Some of the larger outfits in residential, they don't have enough employees, so they sub out to smaller outfits, furnace installs, AC installs, and they pay them peanuts on the dollar. And it happens all the time.
My second point is because of the contract and employment law, the way it's structured up in Canada, it's much more likely that that sub arrangement is legal and can be defended because it's still going to be
Yeah.
backed up by a document, which is what the entire Canadian employment system is based on. So whether they're a sub or an employee ultimately shouldn't matter as much. Again, I'm not an employment law expert up in Canada, but it makes sense that it would be easier.
Yeah.
Sounds like Gary might be going after this to read some Canadian employment law. But it sounds like there's sort of 2 different types of subs here, right? There's the kind of subbing that Gary you're talking about, which is fully, it seems like legal and normal, which is a larger company, whether they're a general contractor or a maintenance company subbing out a small part of the work. But I think, Robin, you hit up something interesting earlier, which is more like peer-to-peer subs, where you got like guys that are, residential HVAC, and they're each solo shops, and there's a lot of that kind of sharing of work that happens too. And I think the point I would like to make is just that in that kind of sub, there's actually, Robin, you mentioned they each guy gets to have their own insurance, and they have their own taxes, and they have to get their own licenses, and that actually all of that they have to coordinate with their customers. All of that is inefficiency, right? And one of my favorite topics is overhead, right? If you're each, I know there's not a lot of overhead when you're a solopreneur, but there's still a little bit. And if you team up with one of your friends, we'll talk a little bit more maybe about what it's like to go into business with someone. You got to vet the person, obviously, but there's some real advantages to streamlining some of that and creating some more efficiency there. Robin, anything else on just, I know we sort of skipped over this, but when did you hire your first guy or set of guys? I was getting to that earlier. How did you think about whether to look for Gary brought up working with a trade school, like a helper versus an experienced guy. Talk about your first hire or two.
I learned some of my best lessons the hard way. So, I was doing that dance I was speaking of with, the temp stuff, other friends, peers with their own businesses, overlap, teaming up, a lot of that, but then just running myself into the ground, working weekends, constantly, crazy long hours. It was before this January, would be 2 years, I believe. Yeah, 2 years. I was scrambling to finish an install at a client's house on a Sunday, I believe it was, of all times of the week. Bending a 5/8 pipe, weird angle, just trying to get it teed up to go into the unit. And then, so my arm was kind of like this. So my ear was close to my shoulder, physically, like audibly heard my shoulder go. And the client was sitting right there, kind of watching me wrap up for the day. So for me, there was no decision. Physically could no longer work. And I was like, well, looks like I got to hire a guy, you know? So for me, that was that was the decision-making process. And then just kind of forced me into, okay, how do we get on Indeed and come up with a job description and hire somebody? And then how do we get payroll and all that stuff? And everything from that moment kind of cascaded down, and then just the snowball kept rolling. And then, so that also just kind of forced me out of the field, working on the business more rather than in the business as much. And then I've just been kind of going along with that since that injury. So, kind of a
On the
tangent of a
business and
story, but
on the business and in the business are two actually really important terms. And I believe that was in the E-Myth. Did you read the E-Myth? Is that why you use those terms, Robin?
yeah, well, I didn't read it.
On the business and in the business?
So
Okay.
I drive, I burn up the miles on my truck.
So you listen to it.
I listen
I
to
listen
it.
to it as well.
Yeah.
I listen to it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I listened to the one with Ken Goodrich too, the E-Myth HVAC edition. And that's really important, working in the business or on the business. Because if you're in the business working during the day, you're the facilitator of the service work and install work, then who's in the background working on the business, your marketing and your outreach to potential employees and employee retention and your systems and stuff, like who's doing that if you're in the field. So
There's so
those are
much of
really
that.
two important terms that are totally different things. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Ian, you said something important earlier. I don't want to make sure to skip over it. So let's assume you've hired a guy or girl and she's ready to start in the field. But you mentioned payroll and you mentioned unemployment insurance. You mentioned workers' comp. These are three really important things you immediately have to worry about. You mentioned some of the modern solutions out there. We don't necessarily need to give a shout out or endorsement of one in particular, but talk about the way to get set up on one of those platforms and those steps and how easy it is rather than work with, other providers out there.
So the easiest system to get started on is normally going to be like QuickBooks Online, where you're set. That's where most people start with their accounting stuff anyway. And they have a payroll function. They have a time clock function that is very easy add-on. So everything's in one place. As you grow, most companies are very quick to outgrow that type of payroll system, but that'll get you off the ground and even help you file for that business acknowledgement in that state, with the unemployment and those other things that you need as far as interacting with the government as a whole proactively. And that also includes, in a lot of states now, there's mandatory 401k systems that are going into place, and paid family leave may be employee contribution, maybe employer contribution. So you need to be aware of what that is in your state. Other things that you need to be aware of outside of the payroll system itself is going to be, do you also have to start factoring in immediately for paid sick time? A lot of states have required sick time, thresholds and things like that. Are you going to provide any sort of health benefits? Especially when you're small and just starting, this is optional, but you need to not only factor in how much you want to pay that new person, even assuming that you're sticking with straight hourly out of the gate, but also what those extra payroll expenses are going to be as you add benefits and taxes and everything else. So doing a little bit of research to kind of estimate that out of the gate would be very wise.
Yeah. Maybe on a later episode, Gary, we should just cover like employee benefits, like how to create a great both workplace culture, but how to find health. Like there's a lot of different ways to offer healthcare benefits. Very, very
Yeah.
important questions. Maybe I'll move us into just a little bit of wrap up. I got a wrap up question for each of you. Gary, I'll start with you. What do you wish you'd known before getting started?
What do I wish I had known? That's an interesting one. That's a tough one because there's lots of things I probably wish I'd known. But here, you know what? Go to Robin first because I want to think about that. I got a couple things in mind, please, if you don't mind.
hot
Sure.
potato.
I love it. Robin, I'll ask you then similar question, but what would you tell a guy, maybe a younger technician, younger version of yourself 5 years ago, who's great at the trade, great at the technical part, and has always dreamed about business ownership, but is nervous to get started? Like, what do you tell that guy?
So I would say I would encourage him like, hey, I think you're probably never gonna think that you're ready to start a business. I don't think anybody, because it is a scary leap of faith. But if all the signs are there, it's just kind of time. Just take the plunge. I would say like, all right, man, go for it. And you're gonna hit some bumps. You're gonna get some bruises. You're gonna learn some lessons. You're gonna learn some stuff on the fly. But that's just kind of what it takes. So if they have it within them to that kind of person, then they got to try it out, because otherwise they're always going to wonder what if. So I'd say go for it. Just hit the ground running and then learn as you go, and then just keep learning and keep developing on the way, and everything's going to kind of fall in place. Just kind of stay on top of it.
Love it. All right, go to you next, and then to Gary last, because I don't want to end on a pessimistic note, but I got to ask the HR guy, what are the, if you're thinking about that guy who's about to get started, what are the most common mistakes that you see first-time business owners and entrepreneurs making, especially in the trades and in HVAC?
So again, the biggest mistakes that I see new business owners make, whether they're solopreneurs, before they start hiring or after they start hiring employees, it's kind of what Robin was indicating, is really the fear, is letting fear stop you from taking steps that that need to be taken, or that you feel need to be taken, almost like a calling. And, if you hesitate too long, if you hesitate on opening that business while your personal situation, personal stresses may grow, and then you're now scrambling as you're trying to get that launched, and that doesn't help you in the long term. Once you have an employee, if you hold on to that employee too long, despite not being in sync, not being able to communicate, they're just bad at the job, whatever the case is, as you're figuring things out, if you hold on to them too long, again, your stress levels rise, and it hurts the brand and the future of the brand, and you could sabotage yourself.
Awesome. I got to ask a bonus question too. Tell us about that wall of hats behind you.
So my wall of contractors, all these hats behind me, and I've got more up above and some to the side here, that are all various brands that I've helped over the years and have sent me swag, or I meet up with them at trade events and shows over the years. And when I do on-site visits to do overhauls, they load me up with swag, and I've had care packages sent for my team, so they're all decked out too.
It's great. We got to get you a Keep HVAC local Carhartt hat. Love it. All right, and then Gary, what do you wish you'd known?
Here's one of my pet peeves, but it comes part and parcel with owning a business, is the amount of, and I knew this already, but when I worked as a contractor, I sort of ran it like a business, because it was me in a truck, my own clients. I would do my own quotes. I would be the point of contact for that person. It wasn't someone from the office or for that customer. And I have a bookkeeper now, and I don't like admin stuff. I hate it with a passion. The amount of, and my admin work is very, very small, because I go into the field 2-3 days a week, because I do, a lot of my focus is on the HVAC know-it-all brand. But the amount of admin work just from 2 to 3 days a week in the field is astonishing to me. And I don't like it at all whatsoever. And I have a bookkeeper that is a subcontracted bookkeeper that charges me by the hour once they've done whatever they got to do. And some of the emails I get from them, even, it's just like, here's a list of, because they can see my bank links to QuickBooks. They can't get into my bank, but they can see the transactions through the business and stuff like that. They can't physically get in and make like money moves or money movement, but they can see what's going on. And even though they can see it, I get these emails. What's this for? What's that for? What's this for? And I look at the email, and there's like 10 questions, and I'm like, I don't have time for this. You know what I mean? I don't have time for it, but I got to do it. So I have to carve out time. I'm tired. My eyes are burning. They're red. I need to fall asleep because it's been a long day, but I got to get back to them so they can continue on with helping me maintain my business. So the admin work, if my business was double, triple, quadruple the amount, I would need somebody, a sub, or I would need to hire someone to deal with it. So that is something that I wish I knew more about before going on my own.
That one I'll echo. I'll echo, because when you asked Gary the question, that's immediately where my mind went. was however
Yeah.
much paper you think is involved, there's probably 2 or 3 times as much. Like everything. And it's just it's way too much.
Yeah, it is.
And then double it again once you have employees.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll try a new term on you guys, which is we talk about inflation in the economy a lot. I've recently been thinking about administrative inflation. It actually, especially around home services businesses and HVAC, because of new rebates and sometimes new permits or that there's actually an increase in the amount of paperwork that's been happening, which also means, as Robin can tell you, he's built a great business around some of these Colorado rebate programs. There's opportunity as well. I wouldn't be here today and thinking about that at work here if I didn't think there's actually significant opportunity to streamline some of that. But it's a real burden. Well, that's a good place to end. Thank you both, Robin, Henry, and Ian Schotanus for joining us for this episode about how to start your own HVAC business. Episode 3, we're going to be thinking about marketing, thinking about how to find your first customers, how to set up your Google page, and all of that. So excited for the next one. And Gary, any last words?
Yeah, marketing is something I love genuinely, because marketing can become the most creative thing on the planet, and your creative side can show. I mean, I don't know if you guys like some of the marketing that happens during the Super Bowl, or some of the marketing that happens even in Europe, where it's unhinged, and it gets real deep and dirty and stuff like that. I love it because I can find humor in almost any situation in life, even the darkest places. I can find something that's funny within it. And I think marketing should poke at the emotions whenever possible. And I think there should be some sort of humor involved as well, and really, really touch the heart and the soul and the minds of who you're trying to attract. Because once you touch their emotion, then they're attracted to your brand. Sometimes it's not always for the right reason. So you have to be careful with how you poke those emotions. So I'm really excited to talk about marketing.
It's great. Great little teaser. Well, thank you guys again.
Thank you, boys.
Have a good one.
Thank you.